Thank you for listening to the If You Market podcast. I'm your host, Sky Cassidy, and the baddest ass PR person in the land, Carla Jo Helms, and co-host of the If You Market podcast, is here with us.
That's me, and I'm lovely too. Hello.
And today we'll be talking about content marketing and using content marketing to fuel demand generation with Kelley Noblet. Kelley's responsible for the strategy and execution of content marketing for Skillsoft in the North American region. Before taking on content marketing, Kelley spent 10 years managing demand generation programs, and that gave her an understanding of the complex content needs for potential buyers. Kelley, we are super thrilled to have you on today.
Thanks for having me, Sky. Thrilled to be here.
So before we jump headlong into content marketing and demand generation, let's talk a little bit about yourself. What can you tell us? What do you want people to know about you?
Well, let's see. I grew up in the Massachusetts suburbs, and I went to college at University of Connecticut, and kind of became interested in marketing because I always liked to write. I wasn't a super creative writer, like I wasn't sitting around writing stories all day, but I learned from a young age that I was good at communicating and wanted to try to polish that skill and transfer it to professional life. So that's kind of what kind of got me in the door with marketing, was trying to see how I could use writing and turn that into earning a living that, wasn't being a newspaper publisher or, a novelist, if you will.
Nice. And then B2B versus B2C, was there any active decision on what way to go there? Did you just kind of end up on one side?
Sort of accidental. In graduate school, we definitely learned about both approaches, and it just so happens that my first job out of college was a B2B environment, and that's kind of the direction I've been going in since then.
I guess it isn't like when you're in high school and thinking, maybe I want to go into marketing. You think, B2B or B2C? I guess it doesn't quite get thrown around. People don't make those distinctions until later in your career.
Yeah, definitely.
So Skillsoft, can you tell us a little bit about what Skillsoft does and kind of what your role there is?
Skillsoft is a leading e-learning company. They make courseware that helps people learn new skills like compliance or new IT skills, or how to achieve leadership skills. And what my day-to-day there is, I manage the content marketing function. So I make sure that we have a variety of thought leadership like content, such as white papers, articles, listicles, infographics that our demand gen team can use to attract new business, and also to help support our customers and sales teams when they are out there talking to prospective buyers.
Can you give just an average day for you?
It's madness, actually.
Writing.
Well, and you wouldn't believe, the process it is to get something published, and, kind of what it takes to get there. So every day is different, which I like, because I think if every day were the same, I would be bored. It ranges from making edits to something to sitting in a meeting with somebody trying to come up with a strategy for a particular product line. It's looking at something that we have and trying to figure out a different way to tell that story. It's certainly a lot of different things, and it's a lot of collaboration with different members of the company, which I like, because I like talking to people and I like meeting new people and hearing different perspectives and whatnot. So that's one thing about the job that's really interesting and exciting. From a higher level, content marketing is, on my end, is making sure that we have a healthy editorial, that we have a strategy for the year, that we're not just creating things, on a whim. It's like we are looking at our what we want to say for the year and trying to create content that aligns with that. And it's my job to kind of get that conversation started. And it requires a lot of buy-in with a lot of different people within the organization, the executive team. Certainly our leaders that are at the top are very much interested in what we're going out there with. So they want to weigh in on that. And then all our subject matter experts that manage product functions have a point of view because they're an expert on their field. So we want to consult them. and find out what it is that is the hot button issue that we should be talking about.
So you're not given a, hey, create this content thing really. You're coming up like an outside ad agency or something almost with the overall plan and the concepts and then having to go and sell it to your executives.
Yes. And so some of the nitty gritty, like, oh, we're going to have 2.5 infographics on this topic. Don't go to the executive. It's at that level. We're talking about the theme for the years.
So there's strategy, and then you work with the other teams to build out the tactical.
Yeah, but I'm the catalyst for the strategy, and people come to me with ideas, but it was my job to kind of get the process started for how are we going to go to market. I go to meetings
Yeah.
and things, and I hear ideas, and then I present them and say, hey, I think we should try to do it this way, and then I get the feedback from the executive leaders, and then we course correct accordingly. And we do this throughout the year too, because at the beginning of the year you might think one way, and then towards the end of the year things might change. So we're agile, and can pivot when necessary.
Constantly adjusting, yeah.
Exactly, yeah.
But sometimes you have to adjust with the news too, I suppose. If there's something that's relevant to your business, you don't want to ignore it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that tends to be more on the PR side for sure, and I definitely support that function with content. But certainly, like if there's a big news item, that kind of tends to be more on that end, because on my end I'm doing longer form content most of the time. And certainly if we had a plan for the year and we said, oh, in Q4 we're going to create XYZ, and then the news goes one direction, that might influence how we spin a particular topic for sure. So it's like we always have to kind of have our eyes open and ears open for what's changing in the world.
Right, right.
Well, since we're diving into it already, I'd like to dive into like content generation, demand generation, and kind of for our audiences, and then how do you go about it? Because I think you're already talking about that already.
Oh yeah, can you give us an overview of what that is and what the kind of the connection, I guess, to kick things off?
Well, content fuels demand generation. You can't go out there and try to get people to buy your product if you don't have something of value to offer them. Nowadays, people are making their decisions about where they want to buy and what they're interested in before they've spoken to someone. So if you don't have great thought leadership out there where people can find it, then you're missing out, because your competitor does, and they're out there reading from a competitor's website instead of getting what they need through your channels. So that's one thing. What I try to do is I'm aware of what our demand generation team is doing. I'm aware of their budget and what sort of placements they're going for. And so when I'm thinking about the content strategy, I'm thinking about content that will perform well in the channels that team is using. What the advertising channels that they're using, and the internal campaigns that they might be doing within the database that we have. So basically, they can't go and do an email blast if they don't have something to draw people to. So that's
Right,
where I
right.
come in. I support that, so that team has a healthy campaign pipeline in place with interesting content to offer.
But it sounds like what you're starting from is a strategy to create demand. It's not just a content strategy. It's very different. Like it is to create demand. So it's more tied to sales. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah. So I mean, I'm supposed to be hand in glove with the demand generation team. So they do
Mm-hmm.
have their own strategy. They have their own plan. And then knowing what that is, that helps me come up with mine. What I start at the top, I think about what our corporate themes are going to be for the year. And once those are blessed and decided, then, it's a very much a collaboration with that team about the different angles that we think might perform well on their end. And then we use that to start creating tactical pieces where we actually say, okay, well, we know we're going to talk about leadership, and we're going to talk about high potential leadership, and this is a particular paper that we're going to create, and this is kind of the date time frame that we're going to have it done, so that when they plan, they know what to expect, that sort of thing.
Can you give an example there within Skillsoft of that process? I mean, we're kind of working on hypotheticals right now, but to really cement it for people, maybe something particularly.
Yeah, give us a real life scenario.
Well, so I'm sure that other businesses kind of follow this same kind of idea, but say the demand generation team is told they have a budget of, I'm just going to make it up, say they have $100,000 to spend, and they know they're going to be spending most of it on advertising placements, and some of the advertising placements are targeting executives and some of them are targeting managers, that sort of thing. Me with that knowledge, it might spark me to say, okay, we have this particular white paper that is a topic that would interest both people, but what you might want to do is take that white paper, instead of having two different white papers which are pretty lengthy and time consuming to create, is taking one that could potentially have broad appeal and then positioning it in a way that would appeal to their audience. So you might present it in a slant that speaks to the executive in an email so that they would open it. It's like, empower your team, or give your team the tools they need to have a productive time or whatnot. Versus when you're talking to the manager, it might be, make your life easier by making sure that you have the skills needed to do your job. So it depends on who the audience is.
So you'll make several versions of the same creative, kind of the
Well,
same.
it depends. So, like, it might be that they simply just position it differently when they are doing their writing. So, in their ad, they might position it with that person in mind and still offer the same piece of content.
So you're saying make it for the different publics or target, there's different voices. So this is all part of the strategy of different pieces of who's it going to, and having the same content, but then you have to rewrite it for the different voices.
Yeah, and well, what I'm saying is, like, the advertisements or the emails might be written for the different voice, and that the paper might be broad enough
Right.
that it appeals to them. If it's extreme, it might warrant a slight edit and offering the same paper but with a slightly different spin for that particular audience, or offering a derivative piece um, from that piece of content that might be more appealing, maybe a longer form for somebody that's of executive level, and something more short and to the point, like 10 ways you can optimize your blah, 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 to the person that's actually doing the work directly. So it just depends on the situation. But that's why the partnership between content and demand generation is important, because if content is out there creating in a vacuum and isn't understanding how the demand generation team is trying to work and who they're going after, it doesn't work. You have to kind of be on the same page about what's needed.
So that you don't want to miss that handoff between that department, basically. So your
Right.
content really needs to be focused on helping generate leads. I mean, we're talking about demand generation, but it seems like there's a handful of different things content can do. I've got branding, thought leadership. It can be informational, which I is probably farther down the pipeline, maybe.
Yeah, certainly. Like, content has to support all stages of the buying cycle. So, in my case, because I part of my particular role is to work closely with demand gen. There might be cases where a company has a really large content department and they have some people paired with demand gen and some people paired with public relations. It just depends, I guess, on how the organization may be structured.
And who's the person that coordinates all of those messages? Because that's like can be very separate silos unless you have somebody doing that. Is that
Well,
you?
so on my end, helping establish that common theme and strategy, it gets published in a place where the whole entire marketing team can collaborate. So they have access to that, and then people on the various teams, the leaders of those teams, have access to that framework, and then they adapt the framework according to their discipline. So the person that's the oversees
Okay.
PR at our company knows what the theme is, knows what the hooks are, and uses that when making decisions on behalf of that function. So we empower people to do their job. We don't tell people this is how you have to say it. We have some positioning guidelines.
You let them be creative based off of those positioning guidelines.
Yeah, and internally too, we have people that, if a particular owner of a product would have a positioning guide that they would produce. I would not produce that, and they would you know give people that guideline so that they could go ahead and, do what they need to
Right.
do in their job. So, but everybody's different, that in our case, we try to put the tools out there so that people can work accordingly.
So it seems like the first stage, we've talked a bit about it, is working with the demand gen team to make sure you're creating the right content. You're creating what's going to help them generate leads, basically.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of different types of content. I mean, you mentioned like a listicle, like the top 10 type of things. There's more content that would be informational. There's all different types of things that you can create, videos and all kinds of stuff. So if you kind of figure out what you want to create with that, and are you going to make infographics, all that kind of stuff, then you need to actually create it. Can we talk about the creation process itself a little bit? What kind of tools you guys use there, how you create these the content pieces?
Yeah, the creation process can be madness and highly variable because we're relying on humans and trying to get people to respond in a timely manner. But things happen. People travel. People get sick. People go on vacation. So trying to keep a disciplined timeline for editorial review is always a challenge, and I'm sure that that's a challenge for many companies. Internally, one of our tools that we like to use is Smartsheet. That's how we stay organized. And so Smartsheet is our way of understanding what's in production and the status. It's a way for people to make a request because I come up with ideas for the year, but other people have lots of great ideas because they're very much in the weeds with their own area of expertise. So they might know something I certainly am not attuned to, and they'll come to me and say, we need to be talking about this because this is very important and it falls under this corporate theme. And so that might be requested through that tool, and then progress and whatnot can be tracked using that tool. We have an intranet where we keep our inventory of content. So selective things are on the website. The website is not a repository. We have a web team that manages that and decides how offers might be structured on the website. But internally, we have an intranet destination with SharePoint where we can access pieces of content that may not be accessible via the website.
Right. Finished, in progress, all kinds of stages, that kind of stuff.
Well, definitely finished. Things that are in progress would be shared with those that are part of the editing process. So, if there's a subject matter expert that is the author of the piece, then the editing would be back and forth with that person, wouldn't be available to the organization until it was approved and designed and ready to go. So, that's just one tool that we use, SharePoint and Smartsheet. We don't have, I'm sure bigger organizations might have a content creation tool. We don't have that at our company, but I'm sure that bigger organizations might use something like that to disperse content and manage the creation portion.
Right. So you come up with the concept. You worked with the demand generation team on that. You get all the best ideas from all your people. Then the actual creation, you have the copywriting, the graphic design. Depending on what type of creative it is, you need all that expertise. Do you typically do that in-house? Do you outsource some of it? Can you speak to that?
Yeah. So, we are hoping to grow, but, for the time being, the way we operate is me managing the content and doing some of the writing, and then also relying on external freelancers or contract employees to do the writing. So if something's decided and we have an outline and we have buy-in from the expert, then we have some people that we can give the work to help flesh it out, and support the work with research and whatnot. And then it will go back to myself, and I am always looking at the piece of content before it then goes back to the team of people for review. And so then once everything is approved and ready to go, then we move that. I'm the one that would move it along.
So are you the one that looks at it and shreds it up and throws it in the air and screams at everybody to do better?
No, not like that. No, and certainly when working with outside people, they may not realize something that I know because I was in a meeting or because I just know how we present something. So I'll catch things so that when it goes back to the expert internally, that they see it in the best possible shape. So that's kind of our process. And then what I typically do is I try to get everything blessed and approved before it goes to graphic, because that's a best practice. A graphic designer never wants to make
Multiple changes based off of copy.
copy
Yeah.
changes in layout. It happens, but like for extensive changes, it's just not an efficient use of time. So, it goes to the graphic designer when it is approved and ready to go. And then that person does their beautiful graphical magic, and I give it one last once over, and then that person takes care of publishing it, so that internal individuals can use it, and then it can, if it is applicable, it will go on the website, and the demand gen team can make use of it. So
you repurpose it in as many different places and, I guess sizes and shapes as possible, and then make available to the team, basically.
yeah, it's efficient if you're spending so much time creating a research document, white paper or a research report or something of value. Maybe you did a study and you're publishing an interesting finding, and it took months to do the study and then a couple months to publish the white paper. You don't want to just use it one time and let it go. You want to think about that paper and how you can use it. And I think it influences us. I don't want to spend months of my time creating something that isn't going to get a lot of mileage. So when I'm looking at something, I'm thinking about the potential for derivative work. Could we, make this into a shorter form thing? Could we take this and turn it into an article, or could we take this and ask the person that was the author to simplify and be a blogger on the company blog? It's all those things are taken into consideration, and I'm sure that's a practice that a lot of companies try to follow, because creating content is not free. Even though we might be able to produce things without freelance support and budget, that doesn't mean it's free, because there's time and talent. When you're using me to do something, that's still costing money.
Yeah. How much content do you actually put out per year, per month? Do you have a amount of words or deliverables, or how many white papers, or then email messages to back it up, or how much do you actually generate?
That's something that we're working towards. I've been trying to come up with the science for how much we can produce, given the number of resources we have available to us. There isn't really a magic number. I would think that it really is.
Well, what is it for your company? Do you know now, or?
I think we're still trying to figure out our best practices. Content marketing as its own function is kind of new at our company. Before, it was sort of adopted by many different individuals, members of the demand gen team, members of product, and it wasn't under a particular owner like it is now. So we're still trying to figure that out. I think in order to make a determination about what's appropriate for content, you have to think about, what are we doing? What are we doing for the year? How are we going to use it? How many different programs are we doing? What's the budget? What sort of people do you have to create it? Because it wouldn't make sense if you had the money just to create content for the sake of creating content. If you made 50 white papers for the year, there are 52 weeks in a year. So really, it's like, you need one.
Yeah, I mean, that's a lot of content. When you do a white paper, how much do you actually use it? Like, typically, do you have an email marketing campaign that goes with it? Do you have a blog campaign, a social media campaign? Like, all of those, do you come up with its own campaign for a white paper to make sure that you can utilize the most out of it?
Actually, yeah. So from a performance standpoint, we track by the assets, so we can see what performs. And so fortunately, it's not my responsibility to come up with all the programs. It's my responsibility to kind of know what people need and then create the content for them. But each owner, will make use of a white paper in their own way. Certainly our demand gen team would take a white paper and use it multiple times. over the course of several months in their advertising campaigns, and also campaigns that might target the database. And if it's a really good piece of content, the salespeople would speak to it. And, as they're having conversations with prospective buyers, they might be sharing that piece of content with them.
Right. Well, I know good content and good content collateral can be utilized for years.
Oh, yeah.
Sometimes with just even tweaks, because it does speak to the issues that, industries and, publics are experiencing. What caused the affluence can continue to cause it.
Oh, absolutely. For sure.
Kelley, I've got a question for you to think on here. I want to jump to break, but before we do that, I want to pose a question for you. You think it over during the break. What's the basics that people need to come to the table with? So, for example, if you're going to write 2 blog posts in a year, don't bother. It's a waste of time. If you're going to create a white paper that's the general information doc on your company, well, that one thing is useful. And like Carla Jo was just saying, you can use it for a long time as well. So if you could think of kind of the starting from scratch, what are the first things they should focus on to get the bare minimum kind of in place and maintained? We'll talk about that after the break.
Sounds good.
Hey, this is Patrick McFadden, founder at Indispensable Marketing. If you're a professional service provider or a B2B business owner and you're struggling to attract your best clients and also charge a premium for your service, I think you should really check out our website at indispensablemarketing.com. You'll find some great resources there. And if you want to reach out, just click our free consultation button.
Hi, we're back from the break. This is Sky Cassidy with the If You Market podcast. I've got Carla Jo Helms.
Hi, guys.
And Kelley Noblet here with me. We're talking about content marketing to fuel demand generation. Kelley, right before the break, I threw you a question about kind of the bare bones must-have content for people, or what they should start out with to get the most bang for their buck. Can you speak to that?
Sure, Sky. So I think the bare bones content concept is to think about the stages of the buying cycle, as the top of the funnel, middle of the funnel, and bottom of the funnel. So if you have a lot of top of the funnel content, things that are more broad and thought leadership in nature that attract people, and then you have nothing else to give them to kind of take them along the path, then that's a problem. So thinking about things that support them midway in their buying journey. So maybe good examples of things that are mid-funnel are video assets, or calculator tools, or comparisons, or
you said listicles, which is a very interesting term. Not everybody would know that, but like a listicle would be part of that, right? Like a content piece that's just a list of things.
It could be, yeah. So generally, the way I think of a listicle, it's a 1 or 2 pager. Usually has a snazzy title, something like 5 ways you can like improve your business by doing XYZ. Like it's almost like think of a BuzzFeed article or something like that.
3 things not to do to write your content marketing. The 5
5 things that'll kill you before dinner.
Yeah. Right.
Yes,
exactly. Yeah, it's something where you have to be somewhat knowledgeable about a particular topic.
Kelley, if you're going to have a list, I mean, where would you land in between saying 1 way to or saying 100 ways to? Like, do you find when creating a list, is there a magic number? Do you just want to do however many things there is in that category?
I think you want to keep it manageable. I would say 10 or 12 is sort of the maximum, but having 3 to 5, maybe 5, the top 5 things you could do. It's good because I think people have a short attention span, and what they want is actionable advice that can help them solve a problem immediately. So if you limit it to, the top 5 things you need to do, then that might be appealing to someone that's trying to, solve something specific.
I remember I saw one a while back, and maybe it worked just because of the bizarre nature of it, but it was something like 78 ways to, and I was like,
oh my
what?
God.
How many things can you possibly come up with?
By the way, like I've seen it go all the way up to 13.
Yeah, no.
Once you get into the high, maybe like above 100, though, I want to open it just to see how did you possibly come up with that many ideas.
Yeah.
That would be you.
You can't
I
read
do
them
have a
all.
question though. I have a question for our readers. So we've been talking about a high level stuff and stuff that you're doing, and I'm thinking like they are our listeners, right? So what would be like if someone was going to develop a content strategy around something for demand gen, right? You said the different funnels of the buying cycle, right? Um, what would be a good, like people always want, well, how many pieces do I need for this cycle? And how many do I need for that cycle? And I know it's different for every company, but what is something that they could do? Like for the first section of the buying cycle, would they need a white paper? Do they then need an email campaign to follow up with that? Blogs to go with it, possibly a newsletter? What are the basic pieces that are like the staples that people need to think about with demand gen?
Well, I would say if you were a new business and you'd never done anything before and you had very limited budget and limited team, I think you would start with maybe one idea for the quarter. And maybe you have one high value piece of thought leadership that is, a topic that you think will resonate with your audience. And my interpretation of something that's high top of the funnel is that it's usually broad. It could be a research report. Maybe you've done your own research, or maybe you've licensed a research report, or you've done a white paper that has a lot of third-party research to back up claims. And then you'd want to have assets that are somewhere in the middle. Maybe you take that and you make a listicle, or you do some sort of assessment where a person or a company could look at where they are and with respect to a particular business problem they're solving, and try to see where they are, compared to their peers, sort of thing. And then you want to have things that support the later stages of the buying cycle. If you have somebody that has done a lot of research and has already made up their mind, they're they're between you and two other brands or something like that.
Yeah.
You can't not help them close the deal there. That's where you want to have your references, your case studies, factual product information, which I don't manage, but you want to have brochures or at least some sort of fact sheet or place where someone can go to understand what it is that they would be buying if they were to go partner with your business. So those are the bare bones things. So having one piece of content that you repurpose in many ways in a quarter is certainly the bare bones.
Well, I like that. So let me just see if I'm getting back with you here. So the first phase is like you're giving them enough content to help them make the decision. So you have a white paper. You could follow it up with a listicle. You could follow up with an assessment, this against that, helping them make the decision. But then when you get into the second phase, let's just say, and this is all hypothetical phases, but this is someone who, okay, they're between you and two others, right? So they move into that particular funnel. Well, this would be content based off of helping them make the decision between the others, the fact sheet, the brochures of exactly what they would be buying, the references, case studies, right?
Yep. And so, that stage tends to be closely handled with sales. When people are that interested, sales are having conversations, they're on site, they're sharing that feedback. Certainly, telling you the magical way to go to market, that's that's a little tough, because that is very variable depending on what your business is and what you're trying to achieve, what your goals are, your budget, the amount of people you have to do it, all that. So, saying that you need to have 75 email campaigns in your per quarter, it's something I can't tell you, because it would really depend on what your goals are and who you are and what you're doing. But you want to, if you know that you have budget to do 50 advertisement placements and you have only one piece of content, you might want to consider having other pieces of content to support that. And certainly it makes a lot of sense to take something and rerun it multiple times, because it takes a lot of touches before someone really gets attracted. Even if somebody is being marketed to via a database, it might take 7 touches for them to raise their hand and say, actually, I would like to learn more, or I will answer my phone when being contacted about this particular product.
Right.
Kelley, that's an interesting subject. I want to ask you, where do you come down on the reuse of content or republishing of content? I guess I'd say I see it on social media. Let's use as an example. It can be in email marketing. You could do the same thing, but you've got a piece of content and you post it on Twitter. And I've noticed that a lot of companies, and it seems to make sense to me, will post the same content multiple times per day over time, because it's almost like it's a commercial. There's a feed of information coming at you. It's not like your inbox where you look at each email. You're not going to scroll through your whole history of Twitter. So if you just put it out once in the day, I guess the concept is then only people who are looking at Twitter at that time are going to see it. So when you have content like that, would you recommend posting it regularly for a while, multiple times a day throughout the week, over time? What's your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. And I am the one that creates the content, but it's really the other people that manage those channels that kind of ultimately make the decision on what that magical number is that they want to put something out there for. But, I mean, I would say good common business sense is that putting something out there and assuming that everybody has seen what you've put there the first time and that they're super interested is kind of unrealistic. So if you really do want people to, to see your message and to interact with you, giving it multiple opportunities to be read is definitely the way to go, especially given the amount of time it takes to create something. So certainly, at one point, I don't know what the recommended number of tweets were for a company. Say it was 6 or 8. I don't know what it is today. That's for the social media team on it to make the determination. But you'd want to repeat something that's of high value.
Right. You're wasting your content creation if you make a Super Bowl commercial and only show it during the Super Bowl once, basically.
Exactly. Yeah. So yeah, think of it like that, and assume that people haven't seen it, and you want to make sure you get that message out there. Maybe a slightly different slant.
Well, repurposing is huge.
Right. So maybe treat whatever budget you have like it's your Super Bowl commercial budget, because that is for you. I mean, that's whatever you put out is your Super Bowl commercial, whatever your most expensive.
Yeah, I wish I had the Super Bowl commercial budget to do the work that I'm doing. We do not have that.
Well, I guess my point is whatever budget you have, that's your Super Bowl commercial budget. And whatever your biggest pieces you make, that's your Super Bowl commercial. It's not being shown during the Super Bowl, but wherever it's being put, that's kind of how you have to purpose it.
Well, and that's why being on the same page with the whole company is really key. Everyone being in agreement about how we're talking about the company, how what the key messages are for the company, so that when something's created, one team takes it and puts it out there, and we're all, it's one brand, one band. We're all kind of saying the same thing, and look.
That's a good bumper sticker.
Coordinated. I wish I could take credit for coming up with that, but that's.
You can. We'll put you. I'll quote you on it.
Well, I still have a burning question that I didn't get to. So you mentioned something about parts of the buying cycle. So you said one is could be help make a decision. The second one is you've got somebody that's actually making a decision between a couple of others. Is there a last bucket or a hypothetical last bucket? Like now they've made a decision. Now what?
I guess mid funnel is they're still conflicted and still trying to determine who to go with. It's like maybe they've narrowed it down to, we think we know what sort of solution we need, but we don't know exactly who we're going to work with. And then stage 3 is, okay, let's close the deal here. Who are we going to decide on? And so that's where it gets to be more personal. Maybe they're talking to customers. They're making phone calls and, doing reference calls to find out what the experience is for another customer that's buying something similar to what they're looking for.
Is there an after the creative or after the sale creative where, here's your customers, keep them happy creative kind of a thing?
Sure there is. Yep. And fortunately that doesn't really fall under me, because that's a whole other discipline that could keep someone busy full time. But certainly, you want to keep customers happy. So
I would
making
say
sure
on a
that
budget, if you can't afford to have a person that just focuses on that, it's actually a lot easier than it sounds. It's just called a Starbucks gift card. That's how you keep them happy. You send them that and you're done. Creative done.
yeah, there you go. Yeah, salespeople, that's all they have to do. They don't have to but I would say it becomes a sales responsibility. At bigger organizations, sales would have multiple resources at their disposal to help retain happy customers.
Right. Keep your company front of mind aside from just being bludgeoned by a salesperson. Something just kind of a regular give so their brand is out there, I guess.
Yeah, and really, I mean, depending on what your company does, the way that you go about that would vary depending on what it is you
Oh,
do.
I guess if you're a gym, and that's not very B2B, but if you have a membership service, you kind of don't want to remind them. You just want to go away and hope they never notice they're being billed a month. But
Yeah,
short of
maybe
that,
that's one. Yeah, that's one area where
the ongoing content, you just want to disappear and keep getting that monthly fee.
yeah, they're hooked for the year. So
Yeah. I'd like to focus real quick onto the demand generation part of it. So we talked a lot about the content, the delivery of the content. You got this, you want to create content, you got the sales team that wants leads. What are the actual mechanisms for taking a piece of content and generating a lead from that somebody can do? So they write up a white paper, an infographic, something like that. How do they get lead information to pass to their sales team?
well, I mean, I would think most people would have a form set up somewhere, and how you track forms and manage your campaigns is I'm sure unique to each company and how they want to go about keeping track. But I
So
mean,
gated content kind of.
gated content, yeah, and that's really my focus, is making sure that we have really strong gated content, because we have a particular demand gen budget and we want to make sure that the demand gen team has good pieces of content to use to support their needs for the content gate. So using a form and potentially marketing automation to get names in the database, and then getting those names and notifications to a sales team to do the follow-up calls, because certainly people need to be followed up on in order to get them to take a meeting or do a next step with your company.
Right, right. So that's the number one thing for you is gated content forms, drive them through to you actually get the content after giving them a sample or something like that.
Yeah, and I do have to think about the other types of content that could come out of something higher value. So if somebody on the social team might do an infographic, and that would be ungated. And so while it can be tough for people on looking at the numbers, it's like, oh, we're not getting leads for that. But that's part of the mix, is giving people things for free so that they may choose to raise their hand and actually take a call or to
You've
submit
got to
their
butter
information
them
to
up
you.
basically with your
Yeah.
brand. So you'd start with some sort of brand recognition give, and then look to get in the front door. So you don't want to send the first thing you send them to be some sort of gated content.
Well, it could be, because we considered a lot of our gated content to be top of the funnel. But, it depends on where people are looking.
I
If
guess if
someone's
it's
on your
compelling
website.
enough.
Right, exactly. And, if someone is browsing your website and they're mid funnel, you don't know what stage they are when they're looking at your website. And they try to, learn something about you, and they can't get simple information without having to give their form, they might abandon it. So there's always some amount of content on the website that someone can read and get an understanding, and then potentially fill out the form for the big thing. When we're going after people in our external campaigns, where they maybe they get an email and it's a compelling topic to them, then we do get leads from people filling